My parents convinced my boyfriend to marry my sister. They told him she was better because she had a stable career and could elevate his status in Atlanta society. Heartbroken and humiliated, I walked away to build my own empire from scratch. Years later, at a grand charity gala I hosted, they saw my husband and turned pale because my husband was the one man who held all their debts. Before I continue my story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to cut ties with a toxic family to find your true worth. Growing up in the affluent Buckhead neighborhood of Atlanta meant everything was about image. My mother Vivica was the absolute queen of appearances. For her, our family was a brand, and every action we took had to elevate our status among the local elite. Our Thanksgiving dinners were never about gratitude. They were carefully orchestrated networking events designed to showcase our wealth and power. I am Simone, and at 32 years old, I thought I finally had a handle on my life and my independence. I was running a modest, but growing art dealership focusing on uplifting local talent. It was not the high-powered corporate career my parents demanded, but I was passionate about it. I had also been with my boyfriend Carter for 4 years. Carter was a fiercely ambitious white lawyer from a working-class background who was completely captivated by my family's wealth. He was always desperate to climb the social ladder and secure his place in the upper echelons of Atlanta. I thought his drive was charming, and I truly believed he loved me for who I was. I supported him through his grueling early years at his law firm, cooking him dinners and listening to his complaints about demanding partners. I was about to learn the hard way that in my family, love was always a transactional commodity up for sale to the highest bidder. The betrayal happened right outside my father Marcus' private study. The heavy mahogany door had been left slightly ajar, casting a sliver of warm golden light into the hallway. The house was buzzing with caterers and wealthy guests downstairs, but this wing was completely quiet. I was carrying a silver tray of fresh appetizers down the hall, intending to bring them to Carter, who had retreated upstairs earlier. As I approached the door, I heard my mother speaking. Her voice was low, but carrying that sharp, commanding tone she always used when she was closing a business deal. "Simone is just playing around with that useless art dealer nonsense." My mother said, her words dripping with absolute disdain. "She is a dreamer, Carter. She brings absolutely no value to the family name. You are a man who needs a solid foundation if you want to make senior partner at Roth & Partners. You need a woman who fits the profile of a high-powered executive wife, not someone who sells paintings to tourists." I froze in the hallway. My feet refused to move. My hands gripped the edges of the silver tray so tightly that my knuckles turned completely white. My breath caught in my throat. "Take a good look at this contract, Carter." My mother continued, the rustling of thick paper echoing through the gap in the door. "It is a guaranteed senior partnership track. My husband Marcus has already spoken to the managing partners. Along with this, we are offering a very generous signing bonus from our family trust. But it comes with a strict condition. You leave Simone tonight and you marry Kiara. She is the deputy director of our family cosmetic surgery clinic. She is a respected doctor. She has the status, the elegance, and the vital connections you need to succeed in this city." My heart pounded violently against my ribs. Kiara was my older sister, the undisputed golden child of the family. She had always taken whatever she wanted from me with my parents' full blessing. When I was 16, she stole my custom prom dress because she decided it matched her shoes better. When I was 18, my parents drained the savings account meant for my college tuition to pay for her lavish medical school graduation party in Europe. But surely she would not take my boyfriend of 4 years. And surely Carter, the man who kissed me this very morning and told me I was his future, would decline this insulting offer. I held my breath, standing frozen in the shadows, waiting for Carter to defend me. I waited for him to defend our 4 years of shared history, to declare his love, and to throw that contract right back in my mother's face. "Vivica, you make a very compelling argument," Carter said. His voice was smooth and calculated, without a single trace of hesitation, guilt, or remorse. "Kiara is undeniably brilliant and beautiful, and the partnership at the firm is exactly what I have been working toward for years. But what about the ring? I already bought a ring for Simone." I felt the blood physically drain from my face, leaving me dizzy and sick. He had bought an engagement ring. He was planning to propose to me tonight. And now, in the very same breath, he was actively negotiating my sister's hand in marriage, like a business acquisition. I heard the distinct sound of a velvet box snapping open. "Oh, please!" My mother scoffed, her tone dripping with mockery. "This diamond is absolutely pathetic. It is barely 2 carats, but I suppose it will do for now, until we upgrade it to something more fitting for a doctor. Hand it over Carter. Kiara will wear it tonight to announce the sudden engagement to the dinner guests downstairs. We will just tell everyone you two realized you were soulmates all along and kept it a secret. Simone will throw a fit, but she will get over it. She always does. That sounds perfect. Kiara's voice chimed in. She had been sitting in the room the entire time. I could hear the smug, arrogant satisfaction in her words. I always told you Simone was holding you back, Carter. She lacks vision. You need a real woman by your side. Someone who actually understands money and power. Put it on my finger, baby. Let us see how it catches the light. I stood in the silent hallway, completely paralyzed by a level of betrayal so deep, it felt like a physical knife twisting in my chest. My own mother was actively buying my boyfriend for my sister. My sister was gleefully slipping on the engagement ring that was meant for me. And the man I had loved, trusted, and supported for 4 years had sold me out for a job title and a check without a second thought. The sheer audacity of their greed snapped something fundamental inside me. The crushing sadness I felt only moments ago evaporated instantly. It was completely replaced by a burning, white-hot rage that spread through my veins. I was not the weak, pathetic scapegoat they thought I was. I was not going to quietly run to my room, cry into my pillow, and accept their abuse like I had done when I was a teenager. I set the tray of appetizers down on a nearby console table. Beside it sat a freshly opened bottle of vintage red wine and a large crystal goblet meant for my father. I picked up the heavy bottle and poured the glass full to the very brim. The deep crimson liquid sloshed against the expensive crystal as I grabbed the stem. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and pushed the heavy mahogany door wide open with my free hand. All 3 of them jumped in surprise. Carter turned completely pale, his eyes widening with pure panic as he saw me standing in the doorway. Kiara was holding up her left hand, admiring the diamond ring catching the light on her finger. She was wearing a pristine white silk designer gown, chosen specifically to make her the center of attention at the holiday dinner. My mother, Vivica, simply crossed her arms and lifted her chin, refusing to look guilty, even when caught red-handed. Simone, I can explain. Carter stammered, taking a clumsy step backward. It is just business. You have to understand. I did not say a single word. I walked straight past Carter and my mother. I walked right up to Kiara, who was glaring at me with that familiar, arrogant smirk, daring me to do something about it. Before anyone could blink, I raised the crystal goblet and hurled the dark red wine directly at Kiara's chest. The crimson liquid exploded across the pristine white silk, completely ruining the thousands of dollars of delicate fabric. The wine splashed up to her neck and splattered across her perfectly contoured face, dripping down her chin and onto the stolen engagement ring. Kiara let out a blood-curdling shriek, dropping her hands and staring in absolute horror at her ruined designer dress. Oops, I said, keeping my voice deadly calm and perfectly steady. I guess red really is your color, sister. What is wrong with you, you psychotic freak? Kiara screamed frantically, trying to wipe the wine off her dress, only smearing it further into the expensive silk. This is a custom couture gown. You cannot even afford the zipper on this dress. And that is my ring, I replied, staring her dead in the eye, refusing to back down. But keep it. I do not accept second-hand trash from cowards. The heavy crystal decanter slammed against the mahogany table with a force that rattled the expensive china. My father Marcus stood at the head of the dining room. His face was a mask of absolute fury. The veins in his neck pulsed as he glared at me. Have you lost your mind? He roared. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings of the mansion. You come into my house and embarrass this family. You are a disgrace, Simone. A complete and utter disgrace. I stared at the man who had supposedly raised me. I had just caught my boyfriend and my sister plotting to steal my future, and my father was calling me the disgrace. The injustice of it burned in my throat. Did you not hear what they were doing? I asked, my voice trembling but loud. They were negotiating a marriage behind my back. My boyfriend, my sister, my mother, we were securing a future. My father snapped back, stepping closer. He looked at me with a cold, calculating disgust. Look at Kiara. She is a top-tier surgeon. She is the deputy director of our clinic. She is building an empire. And Carter is on track to be the youngest senior partner in his firm. They are a power couple. They are an alliance this family needs. What are you, Simone? You are a failure. You are a 32-year-old woman playing with canvases and starving artists. You bring nothing to this table. Nothing. You are a financial drain and a social embarrassment. The words hit me like physical blows. Nothing. I bring nothing. I bring nothing to the family because I chose passion over corporate greed, because I refuse to be a pawn in their endless social climbing. Carter stepped forward then. He pulled a crying Kiara into his chest, wrapping his arm tightly around her waist. The wine was still seeping into his expensive suit, but he looked completely unbothered. He looked down at me with a smug, superior sneer. It was the look of a man who had just secured his golden ticket and no longer needed to pretend to care about the stepping stone he used to get there. Your father is right, Simone. Carter said, his tone dripping with condescending pity. You need to grow up. I need a wife who understands the demands of high society. A wife who can hold her own at charity galas and board meetings without making a scene. You are too emotional. You are too chaotic. You are just a girl playing with paints in a rundown gallery. Kiara and I are building a legacy. You could never fit into this world. I tried to pull you up to my level, but you are just determined to stay at the bottom. The absolute audacity of his words made my blood boil. The white privilege radiating from his stance was suffocating. He came into my family with nothing but student debt and a cheap suit, and now he was standing in my father's house telling me I was not good enough for his world. He was using the very wealth my ancestors built to talk down to me. Your level, I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even me. You drove a 10-year-old sedan when I met you, Carter. I bought you your first tailored suit. I paid your rent when you were studying for the bar exam. You do not have a level. You have a ladder and you just used my family to climb it. That is enough, my mother Vivica shouted, stepping between us. You will not speak to your future brother-in-law that way. You are acting like a jealous, bitter child. You should be happy for your sister. She is getting the life she deserves, the life she stole. I fired back, just like she steals everything else. Kiara wiped a streak of red wine from her cheek, leaving a crimson smear across her flawless makeup. I did not steal him, Simone. He chose me. Because I am better than you. I have always been better than you. Everyone knows it. You are just the embarrassing mistake this family tries to hide. I looked at the four of them standing together. My father, my mother, my sister, my boyfriend. They formed a solid, impenetrable wall. They stood together. They stood united. They stood against me. They looked at me not as a daughter, not as a sister, not as a partner, but as a problem to be erased. Fine, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm whisper. If I am such an embarrassment, then I will leave. I will pack my things and you will never have to see my face again. I turned on my heel and marched toward the grand staircase, heading for my bedroom. I needed to get my clothes, my laptop, and my dignity out of this toxic house. Stop right there. My father's voice cracked through the air like a whip. I paused on the first step, turning back to look at him. You are not packing anything. Marcus said, his eyes narrowing into dark, dangerous slits. Everything in that room belongs to me. The clothes on your back belong to me. The laptop you use for your little art business was paid for by my trust. You do not get to throw a psychotic tantrum, ruin a $20,000 dress, and then casually pack your bags. He pulled his phone from his pocket and pressed a button on speed dial. He put it on speakerphone so the entire room could hear. Thompson. My father barked into the phone, speaking to his private wealth manager. I want Simone's accounts frozen immediately. All of them. Cancel her credit cards, cut off her access to the family trust, and revoke her security clearance for the properties. Effective this exact second. Understood, Mr. Williams. The voice on the other end replied without hesitation. My father hung up the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. He looked at me with a terrifying emptiness. You want to act like an independent woman? He sneered. Then let us see you survive like one. You have exactly 30 seconds to walk out my front door. You take nothing. Not your car keys, not your jewelry, not your coat. You leave with the clothes you are wearing right now and nothing else. If you are not out of this house in 30 seconds, I will have the security guards drag you out by your hair. You cannot do this. I whispered, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. It is freezing outside. I do not have my wallet or my phone. 20 seconds. My father replied, crossing his arms. Mom. I looked at Vivica, pleading for a shred of maternal instinct. Mom, please. My mother simply turned her back to me and began dabbing at Kiara's ruined dress with a silk napkin. She did not even look in my direction. She erased me. She completely erased me. 10 seconds. My father counted down, his voice booming. Carter stood there holding Kiara with a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying watching the woman who supported him for 4 years get thrown into the streets. I did not wait for the final countdown. I turned away from the grand staircase and walked straight toward the massive double front doors. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would break my ribs. My hands were shaking, but I refused to let them see me cry. I refused to give them the satisfaction of my tears. I reached out and grabbed the heavy brass handle, pulling the door open. The freezing November wind whipped into the foyer, instantly biting through the thin fabric of my evening dress. It was pouring rain outside, a torrential downpour that was already flooding the long paved driveway. "Do not ever come back," Kiara shouted from the dining room. "You are dead to us." I stepped out into the freezing rain and the heavy mahogany doors slammed shut behind me with a sickening thud. The lock clicked immediately. I stood on the massive stone porch, shivering violently as the icy wind cut right through my skin. I had no phone. I had no money. I had no coat. I was entirely alone in the dark, surrounded by the sprawling estates of Buckhead. The cold rain began to soak my hair, matting it against my face. I looked back at the glowing windows of the mansion. I could see their silhouettes moving around inside, warm and victorious. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought they had crushed me into dust. But as I turned my back on my family home and stepped out into the pouring rain, a new fire ignited deep inside my chest. They took everything from me. They took my love. They took my security. They took my family. But they did not know I was going to take it all back. Each step I took down the long, winding driveway felt like walking over broken glass. The freezing water filled my expensive heels, making every movement a struggle, but I forced myself to keep moving forward. I could hear the faint sound of music starting up again from inside the house. The string quartet was resuming their performance as if nothing had happened, as if my entire life had not just been erased by a phone call and a locked door. The betrayal was complete. It was absolute. It was suffocating. They expected me to break. They expected me to crawl back tomorrow, begging for forgiveness and accepting whatever scraps of dignity they allowed me to keep. That was their fatal mistake. They severely underestimated the woman they had just thrown into the storm. I walked until my feet bled, and the mansion disappeared from view, swallowed by the dark, stormy night. I had nothing but the soaking wet dress clinging to my freezing body, but I had never felt more dangerous. My father Marcus burst into the hallway, his face flushed a deep, angry purple. He took one look at Kiara covered in red wine and completely ignored the fact that my boyfriend of 4 years was standing there holding my sister. Instead of asking what happened, he marched directly toward me and slammed his heavy hand against the console table, making the remaining glasses rattle. "You ungrateful, vicious little girl," he roared. "You are an absolute disgrace to this family. You come into my house and ruin your sister's engagement night because you cannot handle that someone finally realized your true worth." I stared at him, my chest heaving. My true worth, I asked, my voice shaking with rage. They were literally buying him behind my back. They were trading a law partnership for a wedding ring. My father did not even flinch. He stepped closer, towering over me. "It is called securing an alliance, Simone. Carter is on a fast track to becoming a senior partner. Kiara is a brilliant surgeon. They are a power couple who will elevate the Williams name and secure our legacy in this city. What exactly do you bring to this family? You play around in a dusty art gallery selling worthless canvases to nobodies. You are a financial drain and a social embarrassment." Carter chuckled, a low, cruel sound. He pulled Kiara closer, wrapping his arm protectively around her waist despite the wine soaking into his suit. "Do not be too hard on her," Marcus Carter said, using that patronizing upper-class tone he had practiced so desperately to perfect. "Simone just does not understand how the real world works. She lacks the pedigree and the intellect to survive in elite circles. I tried to lower myself to her level for 4 years, but it was exhausting. Kiara and I are building an empire. Simone is just a liability." The sheer arrogance of this man, this outsider who had used my money to buy his first decent suit, standing in my childhood home and calling me a liability, was suffocating. I turned to my mother, hoping for a single ounce of defense, but Vivica simply handed Kiara a silk towel and glared at me. "You are nothing but a jealous failure," my mother spat. "You are lucky we even let you sit at our dinner table." I looked at the 4 of them standing united against me. "Fine," I said, stepping back. "If I am such a failure, I will leave." I turned toward the staircase to pack my things, but my father grabbed my arm hard enough to leave a deep bruise. "You are not taking anything," he growled. "Everything you own was bought with my money. The clothes, the car, the gallery space. It all belongs to me." He pulled out his phone and dialed his wealth manager, putting it on speaker for the entire room to hear. "Freeze all of Simone Williams' accounts immediately. Cancel her credit cards and revoke her trust access. Do it right this second." He hung up and pointed a trembling finger at the front door. Get out of my house. You take the clothes on your back and your purse. Nothing else. If you are not out of my sight in 10 seconds, I will have security throw you onto the pavement. The heavy oak front doors slammed shut behind me, locking with a loud, definitive click. I stumbled down the sprawling driveway of the estate, the freezing November rain hitting my bare arms like icy needles. I had nothing but the thin evening dress I was wearing and my leather handbag. The sky was pitch black and the storm was escalating, turning the manicured lawns into muddy swamps. I reached the main road and pulled out my phone, my hands shaking violently from the cold. I opened the rideshare app and requested a car to get away from the wealthy neighborhood. A red error message flashed across the screen. Payment method declined. I tried my secondary card. Declined. My father had not been bluffing. He had financially executed me in a matter of minutes. I was stranded miles away from the city center with $0 to my name. I started walking the harsh pavement, tearing at my feet through my soaked heels. The wind howled, tearing through the trees and driving the freezing rain sideways. After walking for what felt like hours, I spotted a dimly lit bus shelter at the edge of an industrial park. I rushed inside, shivering uncontrollably, trying to shield myself from the biting wind. I huddled on the cold metal bench, desperately rubbing my arms to generate heat. The street was completely deserted until two figures emerged from the shadows of a nearby alley. They were dressed in dark hoodies, moving quickly and purposefully toward the shelter. My instincts flared, but before I could run, they cornered me, blocking the only exit. "Give up the bag, lady," the taller one demanded, stepping into the dim light. I clutched my leather handbag tightly to my chest. It contained my identification, my dead phone, and the absolute last shreds of my life. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Get away from me." The shorter man lunged forward, grabbing the strap of my bag. I fought back instantly. All the rage, the betrayal, and the humiliation from my family boiled over. I drove my heel directly into his knee and swung my elbow hard into his face. He cursed, stumbling backward, but the taller man grabbed my hair, yanking me roughly against the glass wall of the shelter. I kicked and screamed, refusing to let go of the bag, fighting like a feral animal backed into a corner. I was not going to let the universe take one more thing from me tonight. Just as the taller man raised his fist to strike me, a blinding pair of headlights swept across the wet pavement. A massive, sleek black Rolls-Royce violently swerved to the curb, its tires screeching against the asphalt. Before the car even fully stopped, the doors flew open. Three massive men in pristine black suits rushed out, moving with terrifying speed and precision. They did not shout. They did not hesitate. They simply grabbed the two muggers and slammed them into the concrete with effortless, brutal force. The muggers scrambled to their feet and sprinted away into the darkness, terrified by the sudden, violent intervention. I slid down the glass wall of the bus shelter, gasping for air, clutching my torn handbag to my chest. The rain continued to pour, drumming heavily against the roof. The back door of the Rolls-Royce slowly opened. A man stepped out, unfolding a large black umbrella. I could not see his face clearly in the shadows, but his presence commanded the space. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, and his movements were deliberate and powerful. He walked toward me, his polished shoes stepping silently through the puddles. He stood over me, angling the umbrella to completely shield me from the freezing rain. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not ask for my name. He simply reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a crisp, matte black card. He held it out to me. I reached up with a shaking hand and took it. The card had only 2 words printed in striking gold foil: Sterling Holdings. The mysterious man looked down at me, his eyes piercing through the dark. "Your anger is very valuable," he said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that sent a shiver down my spine. "Do not waste it on tears. 5 years is a blink of an eye to the comfortable, but it is an eternity when you are starving for retribution." I took that black card from Desmond Sterling that rainy night, and I turned my absolute rock bottom into a launch pad. I did not just survive the freezing streets of Atlanta, I conquered them. Today, I am no longer the naive girl holding a silver tray of appetizers waiting for validation from a family that despised me. I am the apex predator of the commercial real estate and high-end art markets. The public does not know my face. I operate entirely in the shadows, pulling the strings of the city's most lucrative developments. They only know me by the title whispered in terrified reverence in boardroom hallways. They call me the Queen of Sterling. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse office, looking down at the sprawling Buckhead district. The same neighborhood where my father had confidently ordered security to throw me out into the storm. My assistant Elena walked into the room holding a thick stack of legal documents. She placed the leather binder on my massive glass desk. The acquisition of the downtown gallery district was completely finalized. 3 rival developers had attempted to outbid me over the past month. I crushed them with a single phone call, buying their debt and forcing them to fold. I signed the transfer papers without a single hesitation, securing another city block for the Sterling Empire. It was a ruthless move, but ruthlessness was the only currency my family had ever taught me to respect. Elena hesitated before leaving the office. She reached into the pocket of her tailored blazer and pulled out a thick envelope. It was an incredibly tacky, ostentatious piece of stationery, dripping with heavy gold foil and embossed lettering. The return address made the blood in my veins run instantly cold. The Williams family estate. I had not spoken a single word to my parents or my sister in 5 long years. They had never once reached out to see if I was dead or alive. I sliced the envelope open with a silver letter opener. Inside was an invitation printed on absurdly expensive textured cardstock. You are cordially invited to celebrate 5 years of marital bliss between Dr. Kiara Williams and Mr. Carter Roth. It prominently featured his new title as senior partner at Roth & Partners. They were flaunting the exact partnership my mother had purchased for him with my sister's hand in marriage. A small piece of personalized stationery fluttered out of the envelope and landed flat on my glass desk. I recognized my mother Vivica's sharp, aggressive handwriting immediately. I picked it up. The ink seemed to drip with her usual venomous cruelty. Simone. I suppose you are still scraping by in whatever miserable life you chose over your family. Kiara and Carter are hosting the event of the season. We sent this so you could finally see what real success looks like. Feel free to stand outside and watch the valet park the luxury cars. You always were good at standing in the background. Do not bother showing your face unless you want to be humiliated again. I did not cry. I did not throw the invitation across the room in a fit of rage. 5 years ago, reading those words would have torn my heart into pieces. I would have agonized over why my own mother hated me so deeply. Today, her words were just a business transaction. It was a pathetic challenge from a weak opponent who had absolutely no idea she was stepping into the ring with a titan. She still thought I was the penniless scapegoat she had discarded. She had no clue that the very ground she walked on could be bought and sold by my signature. I walked over to the private bar in my office and poured myself a glass of sparkling water. I took a slow, deliberate sip and let a cold, calculating smile spread across my face. I looked closely at the venue details listed on the invitation. The Four Seasons Hotel, the Grand Orchid Ballroom, Saturday the 28th at 8 in the evening. They wanted to show off their elite status. They wanted to prove that discarding me was the best decision they ever made. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Elena, come back in here right now. She stepped into the office immediately with her notepad ready. I handed her the tacky gold invitation. I need you to pull the Sterling Holdings master guest list immediately. I want 500 premium invitations expedited by private messenger by tomorrow morning. Send them to the governor, the mayor, every major corporate CEO, and the entire elite social registry of Atlanta. We are hosting a massive charity gala for the Sterling Arts Foundation. Elena looked down at the invitation, and then up at me, her expression perfectly professional. Where are we hosting this gala, Mrs. Sterling? I took another sip of my water, my smile widening into something truly dangerous. The Four Seasons Hotel. Book the Imperial Ballroom. It is the massive venue directly across the hall from the Orchid Room. I want you to buy out the entire hotel staff. Double their wages for the night so they prioritize our event exclusively. I want the absolute finest vintage champagne, the most exclusive caterers in the state, and the most aggressive security team you can possibly find. Buy out every single premium floral arrangement in the city, so my sister is left with nothing but basic centerpieces. Book it for Saturday the 28th, 8 in the evening. Exactly the same date and time as my family's little party. Elena nodded, a wicked gleam sparking in her eye as she realized exactly what I was doing. Consider it done. We will completely monopolize the valet service and the VIP entrances as well. I turned back to the window, watching the city lights flicker to life under the darkening sky. My mother wanted to challenge me to show my face. She wanted me to stand outside and watch their success. I was going to do much more than that. I was going to eclipse her entire existence. I was going to force them to watch as the entire city walked right past their pathetic anniversary dinner to bow down to the empire I built from the mud they left me in. The game was finally set, and they had no idea they were already losing. The polished marble floors of the Four Seasons lobby gleamed under the massive crystal chandeliers. I walked through the grand entrance not as a guest, but as an owner claiming her territory. I wore a tailored black trench coat over a sharp charcoal crepe suit. There were no flashy designer logos screaming for attention on my clothes. True wealth does not need to announce itself. True wealth operates in silence. I stood near the concierge desk, speaking in hushed tones with the hotel general manager, Mr. Harrison. He was practically vibrating with nervous energy, holding a leather-bound portfolio containing the finalized contracts for the Sterling Arts Foundation Gala. He knew exactly who I was, and he knew that my company could buy his entire hotel chain before lunch. We were just confirming the final buyout details for the Imperial Ballroom when a shrill, familiar voice echoed across the quiet lobby. "Well, look what the cat dragged in from the gutter." I did not flinch. I slowly turned around. Standing 10 feet away was my mother, Vivica, holding a designer handbag like a weapon. Next to her was my sister, Kiara, wearing a bright pink cocktail dress that screamed desperate for attention. And right beside them stood Carter. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit and a smug, arrogant grin that I wanted to permanently erase from his face. They were holding a glossy brochure from the hotel events department. They were here to put down the final deposit for their pathetic little anniversary dinner. Mr. Harrison stepped forward ready to intervene and defend me, but I held up a single finger. I silenced the general manager instantly. I wanted to see exactly how this was going to play out. "I see you finally found a job that suits your skill set, Simone," Carter said, taking a step closer. He looked me up and down, taking in my unbranded suit. "What are you doing here?" "Event coordination." "Or did you finally downgrade to cleaning the venue floors after the real guests leave? If you do a good job tonight, I might toss a $20 tip into your bucket." Kiara let out a sharp, cruel laugh, leaning her head against Carter's shoulder. "Do not tease her, baby. It must be so hard for her to stand in a place like this, knowing she can never afford to eat here. You really should use the service elevator, Simone. It is embarrassing for the hotel guests to have to look at you." My mother simply crossed her arms, looking at me with pure, unadulterated disgust. "I told you not to show your face anywhere near our event, Simone. You are a stain on this family. I suppose you are here begging the management for extra shifts because you saw our invitation and realized just how far behind you truly are." I looked at the three of them. They were so incredibly loud. They were so desperate to project power. 5 years ago, their words would have crushed my spirit. Today they just sounded like noisy children playing dress-up in adult clothes. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend my career. I simply let the silence stretch out, forcing them to sit in their own toxic arrogance. "It is a big day for us," Kiara boasted, unable to handle the quiet. She needed to twist the knife. She needed to prove she had won. "We are finalizing the champagne menu for our 5-year anniversary, but the real celebration is Carter's new milestone. We are moving up in the world while you are still scrubbing floors." Carter puffed out his chest, adjusting his silk tie. "I just secured a $5 million commercial loan this morning." He announced, his voice booming so the passing hotel guests could hear his financial triumph. "First Atlanta Fidelity Bank approved the funding for me to open my own independent law firm, Roth and Associates. It is going to be the premier corporate firm in the city. They practically begged to give me the money. When you have a flawless reputation and a brilliant wife, the banks just throw capital at your feet." He smiled a predatory, toothy grin. $5 million, Simone. Can you even comprehend that amount of money? Or does your brain stop functioning past your hourly wage? First Atlanta Fidelity. The name of the bank echoed in my mind. I kept my face entirely blank, masking the dark amusement bubbling up in my chest. What Carter did not know was that Sterling Holdings had quietly executed a hostile takeover of First Atlanta Fidelity just 3 months ago. I personally owned a 60% controlling stake in their commercial lending division. I was the one who authorized the capital they lent out. Carter was bragging about borrowing my money. "That is quite an accomplishment, Carter," I said, my voice perfectly steady and dangerously calm. $5 million is certainly a lot of money to be responsible for. I hope your loan officer gave you favorable terms." He scoffed, rolling his eyes. "The best terms. Because I am a Tier 1 asset, not a liability like you." I reached into the pocket of my trench coat and pulled out my phone. "Who are you texting?" Kiara sneered. "Your supervisor. Tell them you are going to be late for your shift because you were busy being jealous of my husband." I did not answer her. I opened a direct encrypted messaging channel to my chief financial officer at Sterling Holdings. I typed a single concise message. "Pull the $5 million commercial loan for Carter Roth at First Atlanta Fidelity. Flag his accounts for critical risk. Revoke the capital immediately. No explanations." I hit send. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked up at them. I offered a chillingly polite smile. You know, Carter, the financial world is incredibly unpredictable. Things can change in a matter of seconds. You should really hold on to your assets tightly. Carter opened his mouth to deliver another insult, but he was cut off by the sudden, sharp ringing of his cell phone. He pulled it from his jacket pocket, looking annoyed at the interruption. He glanced at the caller ID, and his arrogant smirk returned. It is the senior loan officer from the bank, Carter said, showing the screen to Kiara and my mother. He is probably calling to kiss my feet and invite me to a celebratory golf game. Excuse me while I handle real business, Simone. Try to look busy before your manager fires you. Carter swiped the screen and brought the phone to his ear. Yes, David, what can I do for you? I watched his face intently. I watched the exact second his reality shattered. The smug, superior smile instantly vanished from his lips. His jaw went slack. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a sick, pale ghost. His hand began to tremble slightly as he pressed the phone harder against his ear. What do you mean the funding is canceled? Carter demanded, his voice cracking with sudden frantic panic. His loud, booming tone was gone, replaced by the squeak of a terrified man. I signed the paperwork this morning. The capital was guaranteed. You cannot just revoke a $5 million commercial loan without a reason. Kiara grabbed his arm, her face twisting with confusion and alarm. Carter, what is wrong? What is he saying? Carter ignored her, staring blankly at the marble floor. Who authorized a critical risk flag? He practically yelled into the receiver, drawing stares from across the lobby. I have pristine credit. I have backing. You cannot do this. You are ruining my firm. Tell me who gave the order. He pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at the dark screen. The loan officer had hung up on him. Carter, what happened? My mother demanded, grabbing his shoulder. Tell us what is going on. They pulled it. Carter whispered, his voice shaking with absolute disbelief. He looked at Kiara, his eyes wide with terror. First Atlanta Fidelity just canceled the entire $5 million loan. They flagged my financial profile as a critical liability. They cut off all the funding. The firm is dead, Kiara. It is gone. Kiara gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. My mother staggered back as if she had been physically struck. The empire they were just bragging about had turned to ash in less than 10 seconds. I stepped forward, the sharp click of my heels breaking their shocked silence. I looked directly into Carter's terrified eyes. Like I said, Carter. I murmured, my voice colder than the rain I had walked through 5 years ago. The financial world is incredibly unpredictable. You really should have held on tighter. I turned my back on them and walked away. The sharp click of my heels against the polished marble echoed through the massive lobby, serving as the final punctuation to their ruin. I did not look over my shoulder. I did not need to. The sound of Carter frantically shouting into his phone, begging the loan officer to reconsider, was music to my ears. I stepped into the waiting private elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse level. My reflection in the mirrored doors stared back at me, calm, collected, and entirely victorious. The first domino had officially fallen. Over the next 4 days, the Williams family plunged into a state of absolute financial chaos. Carter had already signed an ironclad lease for a massive corner office in the financial district. He had poached 3 junior partners from his old firm and paid non-refundable retainers to an elite interior design team. He had done all of this assuming my bank was going to hand him a $5 million blank check. Without that capital, he was drowning in breach of contract lawsuits. The creditors were circling, and the precious Williams family reputation was taking a massive public beating. I was sitting in my private office, reviewing the acquisition blueprints for a new commercial high-rise, when my personal cell phone buzzed. It was a secondary number I kept active strictly for old contacts. I glanced at the screen. The caller ID displayed my mother's name. A slow smile spread across my face. I placed my gold fountain pen on the desk and answered the call, putting it on speaker. It took you exactly 4 days to run out of options, Vivica, I said, leaning back in my leather chair. I must admit, I thought Marcus had deeper pockets than that. Simone listened to me very carefully. My mother barked, her voice tight with panic and barely suppressed rage. She did not bother with pleasantries. She did not ask how I was doing. She went straight to the entitlement. Carter has run into a temporary liquidity issue with the bank. Some automated risk system flagged his firm by mistake. The lawyers are sorting it out, but he needs immediate bridge capital by the end of the week to secure his commercial leases. I remained perfectly silent, letting her desperation hang in the air. I know you have a little apartment on the east side. Vivica continued speaking quickly as if she could bulldoze me into compliance. I spoke to a broker. You are going to take out a second mortgage on it today. You can pull at least $80,000 in equity. You will wire that money directly to Carter's escrow account by tomorrow morning. We will pay you back when the bank clears his primary loan. The sheer delusion of her demand was staggering. 5 years ago, she watched my father throw me into a freezing rainstorm with nothing but the clothes on my back. She had looked me dead in the eye and called me a jealous failure. Now her golden son-in-law was failing, and she was demanding I mortgage my imaginary poverty to save him. Let me make sure I understand you correctly, I replied, keeping my voice completely devoid of emotion. You want me to leverage my home to bail out the man who publicly humiliated me, the man who is marrying the sister who stole him. He is family Simone. Vivica snapped, slamming her hand against something hard on her end of the line. You owe this family. We raised you. We paid for your life before you decided to become a rebellious disappointment. Carter is going to be a powerhouse in this city, and he needs capital right now. Do not be selfish. Go to the bank and sign the papers. My mother, I said softly. You have absolutely no idea who you are talking to. I am not going to give Carter a single dime. I am going to watch his pathetic little firm collapse before it even opens. Do not ever call this number again. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto my desk. I knew Vivica Williams better than anyone. She was a cornered animal, and cornered animals always lash out. By the next morning, she launched her offensive. If she could not bully me into submission in private, she was going to try and destroy me in public. Elena walked into my office with her tablet, holding back a look of utter disgust. She placed the screen in front of me. Your mother has been very busy on social media, Mrs. Sterling, Elena said quietly. I looked at the screen. Vivica had posted a long, dramatic statement across all her high society social circles and public pages. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. She painted herself as a heartbroken mother who had been robbed by her own flesh and blood. The post claimed that I had stolen thousands of dollars from the family trust 5 years ago and ran away. She claimed I was a bitter, unhinged woman who was currently working a minimum wage event planning job and stalking the family out of sheer jealousy. She explicitly tagged the rundown art gallery I used to work at, demanding they fire me for being a thief and a liability. The comments were flooded with her wealthy friends offering their sympathies and condemning my terrible behavior. They were calling me a disgrace. They were calling me a criminal. They were actively trying to ruin the reputation of a lowly gallery worker to starve me out and force me to come crawling back. Elena looked at me, waiting for instructions. Do you want the legal team to issue a cease and desist? We can file a defamation lawsuit before noon. We can have her accounts permanently suspended. I chuckled, handing the tablet back to her. No, let her type. Let her spread her little lies to every country club wife in Atlanta. It is only going to make the truth that much more devastating when it hits them. She thinks she is destroying a peasant. She does not realize she is throwing stones at a fortress. I stood up and walked over to the digital map of Atlanta projected on my wall. It highlighted every single property asset owned by Sterling Holdings. Let my mother play on social media. I am going to play the real game. How is the situation with Kiara's clinic progressing? Elena pulled up a new file on her tablet. The trap was set perfectly. Kiara was the deputy director of the most exclusive cosmetic surgery center in the state. Her entire reputation and income relied on one massive contract. The clinic was the primary recovery partner for a luxury medical supplier that provided all their high-tech equipment and VIP client referrals. It was the backbone of her surgical empire. Execute the order I commanded. Across the city, Kiara was sitting in her pristine white office sipping an imported latte and browsing bridal magazines. She was completely oblivious to the hurricane about to tear her world apart. Her desk phone rang sharply. She answered it with her usual arrogant drawl, expecting a vendor to confirm her floral arrangements. Instead, it was the chief executive of her medical supplier. Dr. Williams, the executive, said, his voice strained and entirely devoid of warmth. I am calling to inform you that we are terminating our partnership with your clinic effective immediately. We are pulling all of our equipment and canceling all VIP patient transfers. Kiara dropped her coffee cup. The hot liquid splashed across her white designer skirt, but she barely noticed. What are you talking about? She shrieked, standing up so fast her chair crashed to the floor. You cannot cancel our contract. We have a 10-year exclusive agreement. You are the sole supplier for our recovery suites. Not anymore, the executive replied coldly. We were just notified that your clinic is the target of a massive commercial lawsuit. An anonymous private equity firm just filed an injunction against your property, They claim your entire facility is violating commercial zoning laws, and they have purchased the surrounding debt to force a foreclosure. Your assets are being frozen as we speak. We cannot be associated with a clinic that is about to be padlocked by the state. Kiara was hyperventilating, her manicured nails digging into her desk. An anonymous firm, she yelled. Who is doing this? You cannot just abandon us based on a lawsuit. Who filed it? The executive sighed heavily. The parent company is completely hidden behind corporate trusts, but the holding company executing the injunction is called Sterling Holdings. I strongly suggest you find yourself a good lawyer, Dr. Williams, because whoever they are, they want you completely destroyed. The line went dead. Kiara stood in her ruined office, clutching her phone as the walls of her perfect life began to crumble. She had no idea that the phantom tightening the noose around her neck was the same sister she had cast out into the rain. The heavy crystal decanter slammed against the mahogany table with a force that rattled the expensive china. My father Marcus stood at the head of the dining room. His face was a mask of absolute fury. The veins in his neck pulsed as he glared at me. "Have you lost your mind?" he roared. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings of the mansion. "You come into my house and embarrass this family. You are a disgrace, Simone. A complete and utter disgrace." I stared at the man who had supposedly raised me. I had just caught my boyfriend and my sister plotting to steal my future, and my father was calling me the disgrace. The injustice of it burned in my throat. "Did you not hear what they were doing?" I asked, my voice trembling but loud. "They were negotiating a marriage behind my back, my boyfriend, my sister, my mother. We were securing a future." My father snapped back, stepping closer. He looked at me with a cold, calculating disgust. "Look at Kiara. She is a top-tier surgeon. She is the deputy director of our clinic. She is building an empire. And Carter is on track to be the youngest senior partner in his firm. They are a power couple. They are an alliance this family needs. What are you, Simone? You are a failure. You are a 32-year-old woman playing with canvases and starving artists. You bring nothing to this table. Nothing. You are a financial drain and a social embarrassment." The words hit me like physical blows. Nothing. I bring nothing. I bring nothing to the family because I chose passion over corporate greed. Because I refused to be a pawn in their endless social climbing. Carter stepped forward then. He pulled a crying Kiara into his chest, wrapping his arm tightly around her waist. The wine was still seeping into his expensive suit, but he looked completely unbothered. He looked down at me with a smug, superior sneer. It was the look of a man who had just secured his golden ticket and no longer needed to pretend to care about the stepping stone he used to get there. "Your father is right, Simone," Carter said, his tone dripping with condescending pity. "You need to grow up. I need a wife who understands the demands of high society. A wife who can hold her own at charity galas and board meetings without making a scene. You are too emotional. You are too chaotic. You are just a girl playing with paints in a rundown gallery. Kiara and I are building a legacy. You could never fit into this world. I tried to pull you up to my level, but you are just determined to stay at the bottom." The absolute audacity of his words made my blood boil. The white privilege radiating from his stance was suffocating. He came into my family with nothing but student debt and a cheap suit, and now he was standing in my father's house telling me I was not good enough for his world. He was using the very wealth my ancestors built to talk down to me. "Your level." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even me. "You drove a 10-year-old sedan when I met you, Carter. I bought you your first tailored suit. I paid your rent when you were studying for the bar exam. You do not have a level. You have a ladder, and you just used my family to climb it." "That is enough," my mother Vivica shouted, stepping between us. "You will not speak to your future brother-in-law that way. You are acting like a jealous, bitter child. You should be happy for your sister. She is getting the life she deserves, the life she stole." I fired back. "Just like she steals everything else." Kiara wiped a streak of red wine from her cheek, leaving a crimson smear across her flawless makeup. "I did not steal him, Simone. He chose me. Because I am better than you. I have always been better than you. Everyone knows it. You are just the embarrassing mistake this family tries to hide." I looked at the four of them standing together. My father, my mother, my sister, my boyfriend. They formed a solid, impenetrable wall. They stood together. They stood united. They stood against me. They looked at me not as a daughter, not as a sister, not as a partner, but as a problem to be erased. "Fine," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm whisper. "If I am such an embarrassment, then I will leave. I will pack my things and you will never have to see my face again." I turned on my heel and marched toward the grand staircase, heading for my bedroom. I needed to get my clothes, my laptop, and my dignity out of this toxic house. Stop right there. My father's voice cracked through the air like a whip. I paused on the first step, turning back to look at him. You are not packing anything, Marcus said, his eyes narrowing into dark, dangerous slits. Everything in that room belongs to me. The clothes on your back belong to me. The laptop you use for your little art business was paid for by my trust. You do not get to throw a psychotic tantrum, ruin a $20,000 dress, and then casually pack your bags. He pulled his phone from his pocket and pressed a button on speed dial. He put it on speakerphone so the entire room could hear. Thompson. My father barked into the phone, speaking to his private wealth manager. I want Simone's accounts frozen immediately. All of them. Cancel her credit cards, cut off her access to the family trust, and revoke her security clearance for the properties. Effective this exact second. Understood, Mr. Williams? The voice on the other end replied without hesitation. My father hung up the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. He looked at me with a terrifying emptiness. You want to act like an independent woman, he sneered. Then let us see you survive like one. You have exactly 30 seconds to walk out my front door. You take nothing. Not your car keys, not your jewelry, not your coat. You leave with the clothes you are wearing right now and nothing else. If you are not out of this house in 30 seconds, I will have the security guards drag you out by your hair. You cannot do this. I whispered, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. It is freezing outside. I do not have my wallet or my phone. 20 seconds, my father replied, crossing his arms. Mom. I looked at Vivica, pleading for a shred of maternal instinct. Mom, please. My mother simply turned her back to me and began dabbing at Kiara's ruined dress with a silk napkin. She did not even look in my direction. She erased me. She completely erased me. 10 seconds. My father counted down, his voice booming. Carter stood there holding Kiara with a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying watching the woman who supported him for 4 years get thrown into the streets. I did not wait for the final countdown. I turned away from the grand staircase and walked straight toward the massive double front doors. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would break my ribs. My hands were shaking, but I refused to let them see me cry. I refused to give them the satisfaction of my tears. I reached out and grabbed the heavy brass handle, pulling the door open. The freezing November wind whipped into the foyer, instantly biting through the thin fabric of my evening dress. It was pouring rain outside, a torrential downpour that was already flooding the long paved driveway. Do not ever come back, Kiara shouted from the dining room. You are dead to us. I stepped out into the freezing rain, and the heavy mahogany doors slammed shut behind me with a sickening thud. The lock clicked immediately. I stood on the massive stone porch, shivering violently as the icy wind cut right through my skin. I had no phone, I had no money, I had no coat. I was entirely alone in the dark, surrounded by the sprawling estates of Buckhead. The cold rain began to soak my hair, matting it against my face. I looked back at the glowing windows of the mansion. I could see their silhouettes moving around inside, warm and victorious. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought they had crushed me into dust. But as I turned my back on my family home and stepped out into the pouring rain, a new fire ignited deep inside my chest. They took everything from me. They took my love. They took my security. They took my family. But they did not know I was going to take it all back. Each step I took down the long, winding driveway felt like walking over broken glass. The freezing water filled my expensive heels, making every movement a struggle, but I forced myself to keep moving forward. I could hear the faint sound of music starting up again from inside the house. The string quartet was resuming their performance as if nothing had happened. As if my entire life had not just been erased by a phone call and a locked door. The betrayal was complete. It was absolute. It was suffocating. They expected me to break. They expected me to crawl back tomorrow begging for forgiveness and accepting whatever scraps of dignity they allowed me to keep. That was their fatal mistake. They severely underestimated the woman they had just thrown into the storm. I walked until my feet bled, and the mansion disappeared from view, swallowed by the dark, stormy night. I had nothing but the soaking wet dress clinging to my freezing body, but I had never felt more dangerous. I turned my back on their stunned silence and walked out of the hotel lobby. The satisfying sound of Carter frantically begging the bank officer echoed behind me. I did not look back. I stepped into the back of my waiting town car and instructed my driver to take me to the office. The first domino had officially fallen, but the destruction of their empire was only just beginning. Over the next 48 hours, absolute panic consumed the Williams family. Without the $5 million loan, Carter was completely paralyzed. He had signed expensive commercial leases and poached high-paid lawyers from his former firm. Now he had zero capital to pay them. The glorious launch of his independent law firm turned into a catastrophic breach of contract nightmare overnight. They needed cash, and they needed it immediately. My burner phone rang late Tuesday evening. It was a secondary number I kept active solely to monitor their desperation. I accepted the call and put it on speaker. "Simone, you need to listen to me right now." My mother Vivica demanded, her voice tight with frantic energy. She did not ask how I was. She did not apologize. She went straight to giving orders. "Carter has run into a temporary banking error. We need immediate liquid capital to bridge the gap until his secondary loans clear. I know you have that small apartment on the east side. I spoke to a broker. You are going to take out a second mortgage today. You can pull at least $80,000 in equity and wire it to Carter by tomorrow morning." I sat at my massive mahogany desk, staring at the phone in pure disbelief. My mother actually thought I was still a struggling artist living in a tiny apartment. She wanted me to mortgage my imaginary poverty to save the man who had discarded me. "Are you seriously asking me to take on debt to bail out my sister's husband?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly flat. "It is a sacrifice for the family, Simone." Vivica snapped, her patience entirely gone. "He is a brilliant lawyer, and he is going to be incredibly powerful. You owe us this much after the embarrassment you caused us. Go to the bank first thing in the morning." I let out a sharp laugh. "I will not give you a single dime, Vivica. I am going to enjoy watching you all lose everything." I ended the call and tossed the phone aside. By Wednesday morning, my mother had launched a full-scale public attack. If she could not control me in private, she would try to destroy me in public. My assistant Elena walked into my office and handed me a tablet. Vivica had posted a sprawling, venomous rant across all of her high society social media pages. She painted herself as a heartbroken mother who had been robbed by her own flesh and blood. She completely fabricated a story claiming I had stolen $50,000 from the family trust 5 years ago before running away. She tagged the old rundown art gallery I used to work at, demanding they fire me for being a thief. She was trying to ruin my reputation as a lowly clerk to force me out of hiding. Elena looked at me, waiting for a directive. "Do you want the legal team to file a defamation suit, Mrs. Sterling?" I smiled, sliding the tablet back to her. "No. Let her spread her pathetic lies to every country club wife in Atlanta. It will only make the truth that much more devastating when it finally hits her." "What is the status on Kiara's clinic? The trap has been triggered," Elena replied smoothly. Across the city, Kiara was experiencing her own personal apocalypse. She was sitting in her lavish surgical office when she received a call from the chief executive of her primary medical supplier. They were terminating their exclusive partnership with her cosmetic clinic, effective immediately. They were pulling all of their high-tech recovery equipment and canceling every VIP patient transfer. When Kiara shrieked and demanded a reason, the executive coldly informed her that an anonymous private equity firm had just filed a massive lawsuit against her clinic. The firm cited severe commercial zoning violations and systemic financial fraud. Her clinic was facing immediate foreclosure. The holding company executing the injunction was Sterling Holdings. Kiara was ruined. Her reputation as a top-tier surgeon was collapsing in real time. She was desperate, cornered, and completely out of options. Which is exactly why she tracked down my burner number and demanded a meeting. "We need to talk right now." Her text message read, "Meet me at the Capitol Grill at noon. Family emergency." I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early. I was wearing a sleek, tailored black suit with 0 visible designer logos. True power never needs to announce itself. I had already spoken to the restaurant manager, who happily accommodated my request to be seated at a specific corner booth. It was a private table, but more importantly, it sat directly beneath a high-definition security camera. Kiara stormed into the restaurant 15 minutes late. She looked terrible. Her usually flawless hair was frizzy, and the dark circles under her eyes could not be hidden by her expensive concealer. She slid into the booth across from me, radiating nervous, aggressive energy. She did not bother ordering a drink. She reached directly into her designer purse, pulled out a checkbook, and slapped a piece of paper onto the table. She slid it across the polished wood until it sat directly in front of me. It was a check made out to me for $10,000. I looked down at the money and then up at her panicked face. "What is this, Kiara?" "It is your lifeline," she whispered, leaning across the table, her eyes darting around the restaurant. "My clinic is under investigation. Some faceless corporate entity is trying to bury me in bogus fraud and zoning charges. They are freezing my operating accounts. If this goes to the medical board, I will lose my surgical license. I need a fall guy, Simone. I raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. A fall guy. I have the paperwork drawn up in my car. Kiara continued her words, spilling out in a frantic rush. You just need to sign a confession stating that you were acting as an unlicensed financial consultant for the clinic. You take the blame for the fraudulent zoning filings and the misplaced funds. You are nobody, Simone. You have no reputation to protect. You do not even have a real career. $10,000 is more money than you have ever seen. You sign the confession and you disappear. Consider it a sacrifice for the greater good of this family. I stared at her. The sheer parasitic audacity of her demand was breathtaking. She wanted me to go to prison so she could keep wearing designer clothes. A sacrifice for the family. I repeated softly, picking up the check and examining the signature. Just like you needed me to sacrifice my art portfolio when we were younger. Kiara stiffened, her eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? I am talking about your college applications, Kiara. I said, my voice dropping to a deadly chilling register. I am talking about the fact that you stole my entire sketchbook. You submitted my original artwork as your own to get accepted into that prestigious Ivy League pre-med program because you lacked a single creative bone in your body. You have been parasiting off my talent and my energy your entire life. You stole my art. You stole my boyfriend. And now you want to steal my freedom to save your own skin. You ungrateful little brat! Kiara hissed, slamming her hands on the table. You owe me! You owe this family for keeping a roof over your head. You are a worthless college dropout who sells cheap paintings to tourists. You will take this money and you will sign that paper, or I swear to God I will make sure you never find work in this city again. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I simply picked up the tall glass of ice water sitting in front of me and threw the entire contents directly into her face. The freezing water splashed across her features, ruining her makeup and soaking the front of her expensive silk blouse. Kiara let out a blood-curdling shriek that brought the entire restaurant to a dead halt. Diners turned in their seats, staring in absolute shock. Kiara jumped out of the booth, completely unhinged by the public humiliation. She lunged forward, raising her hand, and slapped me across the face with all the strength she could muster. The sharp crack echoed through the silent dining room. My cheek stung instantly, blooming with a hot red heat. I did not flinch. I did not strike back. I simply touched my cheek and smiled a slow, predatory smile. I looked up at her and pointed one perfectly manicured finger toward the ceiling. Kiara followed my gaze until her eyes locked onto the blinking red light of the security camera mounted directly above our table. Assault and battery. I whispered, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. That is going to look absolutely fantastic during your medical board disciplinary hearing, Dr. Williams. Enjoy the $10,000. You are going to need it for your defense attorney. I stood up, smoothed the front of my suit, and walked out of the restaurant, leaving her trembling under the watchful eye of the camera. The trap had snapped entirely shut. The queen had taken the board. All that was left was the final checkmate. I maintained a small storefront office in the arts district, strictly for my cover identity. It was a modest space filled with canvas prints and cheap lighting, perfectly designed to convince anyone who looked that I was still scraping by. I was sitting at the scratched wooden desk, reviewing the high-definition footage of Kiara assaulting me when the front bell chimed. I closed the laptop screen just as the heavy door swung open. Carter stepped into the small gallery. He looked frantic. His usually perfect hair was unkempt, and his expensive designer tie was loosened. He quickly locked the door behind him and flipped the open sign to closed. He turned around and stared at me with a look that made my skin instantly crawl. It was a mixture of absolute desperation and sickening predatory hunger. I stood up, keeping the desk between us. "What are you doing here, Carter?" I asked, keeping my voice low and defensive to play the part of the intimidated sister. He did not answer immediately. He walked slowly around the room, running his hand over a cheap canvas before closing the distance between us. He stepped around the desk, trapping me against the back wall. He was close enough that I could smell the stale scotch on his breath. "I am drowning, Simone." Carter said, his voice dropping into a low, intimate whisper. "My firm is falling apart before the doors even open. The creditors are freezing my accounts and your sister is absolutely useless. All she does is complain. She is a nagging burden, constantly whining and constantly demanding things I cannot give her right now. I am so sick of playing the perfect husband to a complaining black woman who brings nothing but noise and headaches to my life." He took another step forward, pressing his hand against the wall right beside my head. He leaned in, his eyes raking over my body with blatant disrespect. "I made a mistake 5 years ago," he murmured. I looked at the wrong sister. I thought Kiara was the prize because your parents handed her everything on a silver platter. But she is weak. She is fragile and she completely falls apart the second things get hard. You, on the other hand, you survived the streets. You built a life for yourself. You have a fire in you that she could never replicate. I have always wanted you, Simone. Even when I was standing at the altar with her, I was thinking about what it would be like to break you in. My stomach violently churned at his disgusting confession. He was an absolute parasite, a terrible white man who had infiltrated a wealthy family just to drain their resources. And now he was standing here fetishizing me while actively betraying his wife. I forced my breathing to remain shallow. I forced my eyes to widen, portraying the exact image of a vulnerable woman who was secretly flattered by his attention. "What exactly are you saying, Carter?" I asked, letting my voice tremble slightly. "I am saying I am ready to drop Kiara right now," he declared, leaning closer until his lips were inches from my ear. "I will file the divorce papers tomorrow, but I need a favor from you first. I know you are working event coordination for the Sterling Arts Foundation Gala tonight. I know the CEO of Sterling Holdings is going to be there, the same company that just destroyed my loan." He pulled back, looking at me with a desperate, greedy intensity. "You have access, Simone. You have the credentials. Get me into that gala. Put me in a room with the CEO. If I can just get 5 minutes face-to-face with the head of Sterling Holdings, I can pitch my firm. I can convince them to reinstate my funding. You do this for me, and I will leave Kiara in the dirt. We can leave this miserable family behind and build a real empire together, just you and me." I stared at him, letting his toxic proposition hang in the quiet room. He truly believed his own lies. He truly believed he was such an irresistible prize that I would betray my own flesh and blood just to be chosen by him. He thought I was a desperate, lonely girl waiting for a savior. He had no idea he was standing in the jaws of a trap. I lowered my eyes, biting my bottom lip, as if I was deeply conflicted. "You promise you will leave her," I whispered, playing the role of the naive fool flawlessly. "You promise you will take me with you." Carter smiled, a triumphant, sickeningly arrogant smile. "I swear it. Just get me in front of the CEO." I let out a shaky breath and reached into the top drawer of my desk. I pulled out a thick black envelope embossed with the gold Sterling Arts Foundation crest. I slid a heavy metal access card out of the envelope. It was a premium VIP pass, meant only for the highest tier of corporate investors. I held the card out to him, my hands trembling just enough to sell the performance. "The gala is tonight at the Four Seasons. This is an all-access pass. It will get you past the main security checkpoint and straight into the Imperial Ballroom. The CEO is scheduled to make a private address at exactly 9 o'clock. You can approach the stage then." Carter snatched the metal card from my fingers, his eyes shining with greedy salvation. He looked at the pass like it was a winning lottery ticket. "I knew you were the smart sister," he sneered, pocketing the pass. "Wear something nice tonight, Simone. I want you standing right beside me when I secure this deal. We are going to celebrate." He did not wait for a response. He turned around, unlocked the front door, and walked out into the busy street, practically vibrating with renewed arrogance. He thought he had just secured his future. He thought he had just outsmarted everyone. I stood perfectly still until his car pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the city traffic. The moment he was gone, the fragile, frightened expression melted from my face. I stood up straight, rolling my shoulders back, and let out a long, slow breath. I reached my hand inside the lining of my tailored blazer and pulled out a tiny, high-definition digital voice recorder. The red light was blinking steadily, capturing every single disgusting word, every empty promise, and every threat he had just made against his wife. I pressed the save button. The device chimed softly, indicating the audio file was locked and uploaded to my secure cloud server. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street, my reflection smiling back at me with cold, terrifying anticipation. "Your ticket to hell has been issued." Less than an hour later, Carter burst through the double doors of the Williams estate, waving that metal VIP access card like a holy relic. He had completely abandoned the pretense of their pathetic anniversary dinner. Survival was the only thing that mattered to him now. He stood in the grand foyer and lied straight to my mother and my sister. He told them he had leveraged a massive high-level contact to secure premium entry into the Sterling Arts Foundation Gala. He spun a desperate fiction about how this was their ultimate chance to corner the mysterious CEO of Sterling Holdings and force them to reinstate his commercial loan. Vivica immediately canceled their Four Seasons dinner reservation. She declared that the Williams family needed to arrive at the gala looking like absolute royalty. They needed to project impenetrable wealth and dominance to prove to the city that they were not a sinking ship. That specific delusion sent my mother and my sister straight to Maison Laurent. It was the most exclusive couture boutique in Atlanta, and I knew it was exactly where they would go when they panicked. Kiara marched past the velvet ropes of the boutique with Vivica trailing right behind her. They ignored the other wealthy patrons and immediately demanded the attention of the floor manager. They demanded champagne. They demanded miracles. Then Kiara spotted the gown. It was an absolute masterpiece of midnight blue silk, dripping with thousands of hand-sewn Swarovski crystals. It was the centerpiece of the entire showroom, displayed on a raised glass pedestal under a dedicated spotlight. It screamed power. It radiated authority. It was exactly the kind of armor Kiara desperately needed to hide her crumbling reality. "I will take that one," Kiara said, snapping her manicured fingers at the boutique manager Antoine. "Wrap it up immediately." Antoine rushed over his face, a mask of practiced professional regret. "I am terribly sorry, Mrs. Roth. That particular gown is a custom piece. It is not for sale. Everything is for sale," Vivica scoffed, waving her hand through the air. "Do not play games with us, Antoine. My daughter is attending the Sterling Gala tonight, and she needs to look flawless. We do not have time for standard fittings. Just add a 20% rush fee to the final bill and put it in a garment bag." "You do not understand," Antoine insisted, stepping in front of the glass display to block their path. "This gown was commissioned months ago. It is the only one of its kind in the world. It is specifically reserved for the host of tonight's gala. It belongs to Mrs. Sterling." The name hit Kiara like a physical blow. Her face twisted into an ugly mask of pure visceral jealousy. She hated this mysterious Mrs. Sterling already. She hated that this unknown billionaire woman possessed the power to freeze her husband's loan and now possessed the only dress Kiara wanted to wear. The sheer entitlement began to rot her brain. She could not comprehend someone else having something she was denied. "I do not care who it belongs to," Kiara hissed, her voice rising sharply and drawing stares from across the boutique. "I am a Williams. My husband is Carter Roth. We are going to that gala to speak with her, and I am going to wear that dress when I do it. I will pay double the retail price right now. Name your number." She reached into her designer purse and slammed my father's platinum corporate credit card onto the glass counter. It was the master account for the entire Williams estate. The card that funded their lavish lifestyle. The card that paid for the roof over their heads. Antoine looked at the card, and then at Kiara with profound distaste. He picked it up with 2 fingers and walked over to the main payment terminal. He punched in the exorbitant amount and slid the card through the machine. The terminal let out a sharp, aggressive beep. "Declined." Antoine raised a single perfectly groomed eyebrow. "It seems there is an issue with your bank, Mrs. Roth. That is impossible," Vivica snapped, marching over to the counter and glaring at the machine. "That is a limitless corporate account. Run it again. Your terminal is clearly broken." Antoine ran the card a second time. The same aggressive beep echoed through the quiet boutique. He turned the digital screen so my mother and sister could see the glaring red letters flashing across the display. "Account frozen. Please contact administrator." Kiara felt a cold sweat break out across the back of her neck. The walls of her perfect fake life were rapidly closing in. She snatched the platinum card from Antoine and threw down her own personal gold card. "Use this one," she demanded, her hands shaking. "Hurry up." Antoine swiped it. Declined. Vivica pulled out her primary checking debit card, practically shoving it into the machine. Declined. Every single financial artery connected to the Williams family had been completely severed. My directive to my chief financial officer had been absolute. When Sterling Holdings seized First Atlanta Fidelity, we did not just pull Carter's loan. We executed a total freeze on every cross-collateralized asset tied to the Williams name due to extreme default risk. They were standing in a high couture boutique, surrounded by millions of dollars in luxury goods, and they could not even afford to buy a pair of silk socks. "There must be a massive fraud alert on our accounts," Vivica stammered, her face burning a deep, humiliated red as the other patrons began whispering and pointing. "Someone has stolen our identity. We need to go to the bank right now, Kiara. I am not leaving without that dress." Kiara whispered, her voice trembling with manic desperation. Her entire identity was tied to projecting superiority. If she walked into the Sterling Gala looking like a failure, she would actually become one. The pressure was snapping her fragile mind in half. She needed that blue dress. She needed it to survive the night. "I need to call our security team in the bank," Antoine said, stepping away from the counter and walking toward the back office. "I will be right back, ladies. Please remain here." The moment Antoine disappeared behind the frosted glass door, Kiara completely lost her grip on reality. She looked at the midnight blue gown glittering on the pedestal. She looked at the oversized empty garment bag sitting on the velvet sofa next to her mother. The survival instinct of a parasite kicked into high gear. "Kiara, what are you doing?" Vivica hissed, watching her daughter step onto the raised display platform. "Taking what belongs to me," Kiara muttered, yanking the heavy silk gown off the mannequin. The delicate fabric tore slightly at the shoulder seam, but she did not care. She shoved the glittering masterpiece into her massive designer tote bag, crushing the crystals with frantic, jerky movements. "Are you insane?" Vivica gasped, grabbing her daughter's arm. "That is grand larceny. If they catch you, they will ruin us. They are not going to catch me." Kiara snapped, slinging the heavy bag over her shoulder. "We are leaving. Walk fast and do not look back." My mother and sister hurried out of the boutique, keeping their heads down and pushing past the velvet ropes. They scurried down the busy Buckhead sidewalk and practically threw themselves into the back of their waiting SUV. Kiara collapsed against the leather seats, clutching the stolen dress to her chest, breathing heavily. She had done it. She had secured her armor for the night. She actually believed she had outsmarted the system. She thought she was invincible. She had absolutely no idea that inside the boutique, Antoine was standing perfectly still behind the frosted glass door. He had watched the entire theft unfold on the live security feed monitor exactly as we had planned. He picked up the boutique phone and dialed a direct private number. I answered on the first ring, sitting behind my desk at Sterling Holdings. "Mrs. Sterling," Antoine said, his voice perfectly calm and professional. "It happened exactly as you predicted." She tried to force the purchase. The cards were all declined. She took the gown and fled the premises. I leaned back in my leather chair, a cold, merciless smile touching my lips. "Excellent work, Antoine. You know what to do next." "Already done, madam," he replied. "The police have been dispatched. I forwarded them the security footage and the license plate of their vehicle. They are tracking her movements now." I hung up the phone. Kiara wanted to play dress up in my clothes. She wanted to steal my armor to save her failing husband. She thought she could take what was mine without consequence. I was going to let her put the dress on. I was going to let her walk right into the lobby of the Four Seasons, feeling like an untouchable queen, right before the steel handcuffs clamped down on her wrists in front of the entire city. The evening air outside the Four Seasons Hotel was crisp and charged with the electric energy of Atlanta's ultra-wealthy elite. The Williams family arrived exactly 45 minutes late. It was a highly calculated move orchestrated entirely by my mother. Vivica firmly believed that punctuality was a trait reserved for the working class, and that true power required an audience waiting in breathless anticipation. They pulled up to the main valet stand in their least luxury SUV, projecting an image of absolute, impenetrable dominance. Carter stepped out first, adjusting his tailored cuffs with a sickening level of self-importance. He reached into his jacket pocket, brushing his fingers against the heavy metal VIP pass I had given him earlier that day. He practically vibrated with greed. Kiara emerged next. She was wearing the stolen midnight blue couture gown. The thousands of hand-sewn Swarovski crystals caught the light of the flashbulbs from the local society photographers clustered near the entrance. She posed for a moment, resting her hand lightly on Carter's arm, projecting the image of a flawless, untouchable power couple. She completely ignored the fact that she was wearing a stolen garment that she had stuffed into a tote bag just hours prior. In her manic delusion, the dress belonged to her by right of birth. She looked like a queen, but she was walking straight into a slaughterhouse. Marcus and Vivica flanked them, forming a solid wall of arrogant delusion. They had spent the entire afternoon frantically calling their wealth managers about the frozen credit cards. But the weekend automated systems had given them nothing but generic error messages. Instead of facing the terrifying reality of their financial collapse, they simply buried their heads in the sand. They convinced themselves it was a temporary banking glitch and focused all their desperate, frantic energy on tonight. Tonight, Carter was going to secure their salvation. The moment they stepped onto the red carpet, Carter's true nature leaked out. The driveway was swarming with high society guests and busy hotel staff. A young black valet rushed forward to open the glass doors for them. Carter did not even look the young man in the eye. He simply tossed his keys at the valet's chest, forcing the young man to fumble to catch them. "Do not scratch the rims this time, boy." Carter barked, his tone dripping with absolute unvarnished condescension. "And make sure it stays parked up front. I do not like waiting." The valet politely nodded, keeping his professional composure, but the ugly racial undertone of Carter's words hung heavily in the air. Carter was so deeply intoxicated by his proximity to my family's wealth that he felt entirely justified in degrading the working staff. He looked at the black employees not as human beings, but as invisible machinery designed to serve his ascendance into the billionaire class. It was the exact same underlying disdain he held for my sister and my family, but tonight he was broadcasting his supremacist entitlement for everyone to see. He was a parasite who had used black wealth to elevate himself, and now he felt superior to the very people he was exploiting. They moved through the opulent, crystal-lit lobby like a conquering army. Marcus spotted an old business associate standing near the grand staircase. He immediately puffed out his chest and raised his voice, ensuring his words carried across the crowded room. "Yes, Richard, it is a monumental evening," Marcus boomed, clapping Carter heavily on the shoulder. "My son-in-law is finalizing a massive strategic partnership with Sterling Holdings tonight. The CEO personally requested his presence in the VIP lounge. We are talking about a total restructuring of Atlanta's legal landscape. Carter is taking the entire market." Carter puffed out his chest, soaking in the unearned praise. "We have big plans, Richard," Carter added with a smug, superior sneer. "Sterling Holdings recognizes top-tier talent. We are moving into the billion-dollar bracket before the quarter ends." Vivica nodded enthusiastically, gripping her designer clutch. Kiara simply smiled, adjusting the sparkling bodice of the stolen blue gown. They were completely surrounded by their own manufactured reality. They fed off each other's delusions, amplifying their collective arrogance until they genuinely believed they owned the building. They ignored the quiet whispers of the actual billionaires in the room. They marched forward blind to their own impending destruction. They bypassed the standard registration tables entirely. Vivica led her family directly toward the heavily guarded entrance of the Imperial Ballroom where the private VIP reception was being held. The entrance was cordoned off by thick velvet ropes and flanked by 4 massive security guards in identical black suits. The head of security, a towering, broad-shouldered man named Jackson, stood behind a digital podium holding a scanning tablet. Carter stepped right up to the velvet rope. He did not bother greeting the security team. He simply reached into his jacket and pulled out the heavy metal VIP pass I had given him. He held it out with a theatrical flourish, expecting the guards to immediately part the seas for him. "Private reception for Carter Roth and the Williams family." Carter announced, his voice loud and demanding. "We are personal guests of the CEO. Open the line." Jackson took the metal card without a single change in his stoic expression. He held it over the digital scanner on his podium. The machine processed the barcode for a fraction of a second. A loud, harsh buzzer echoed over the quiet hum of the lobby. A solid red light flashed aggressively across the scanner screen. Jackson handed the card back to Carter. "I am sorry, sir. This pass is invalid. You are not on the VIP guest list." Carter stared at the metal card and then glared at the security guard. "Excuse me." He snapped, his face flushing with instant hot anger. "Run it again. The machine is obviously broken. I was personally handed this pass by a Sterling representative this afternoon." Jackson did not flinch. He did not even reach to take the card back. "The scanner is functioning perfectly, sir. The pass has been deactivated. I need you and your party to step aside and clear the entrance for the actual guests." "What is the problem, Carter?" Kiara demanded, stepping forward. The Swarovski crystals on her stolen dress shimmered as she crossed her arms. "Tell him who we are. Make him let us in." "I am telling him." Carter hissed, his polished composure entirely slipping. "Look at me." He pointed a sharp finger directly at Jackson's chest. "I am Carter Roth. This is Marcus Williams. We are the most important people in this hotel tonight. You are going to open that rope right now before I call the board and have your job." Jackson simply crossed his massive arms, standing like an impenetrable brick wall. "Sir, if you do not step back, I will have you physically removed from the premises. You are not on the list." Vivica pushed her way to the front of the group, shoving Carter aside. Her eyes were wide with furious disbelief. Her entire social standing was currently dangling over a precipice in front of dozens of watching elite guests. She could feel the stares of the other wealthy patrons burning into her back. The humiliation was absolute and intolerable. "This is an outrage!" Vivica shrieked, her voice echoing sharply off the vaulted ceilings and bringing the surrounding lobby chatter to a dead halt. "Do you have any idea who you are talking to? We are the Williams family. My daughter is wearing a custom couture gown specifically designed for this event. We are personal guests of the Sterling Holdings CEO. I demand to speak to your manager immediately." The lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel fell into a dead, shocked silence. A dozen extremely wealthy and influential guests turned to stare at the woman screaming at the security guard. Vivica was completely unhinged. Her face was flushed and her hands were waving wildly as she demanded a manager. She was so consumed by her own perceived superiority that she did not notice the heavy brass doors of the Imperial Ballroom slowly swinging open behind the velvet rope. I stepped out into the soft crystal lighting of the lobby. I was wearing a sleek, tailored black pantsuit. A discreet, clear earpiece trailed down my neck, and I held a digital clipboard in my left hand. I looked exactly like a high-level event coordinator. I looked like staff. Vivica stopped mid-shriek. Her eyes locked onto me. She stared for a long, terrifying second as her brain tried to process why her disgraced daughter was standing behind the VIP ropes of the most exclusive event in the city. Then she let out a loud, harsh bark of laughter. It was a cruel, jagged sound that cut through the quiet lobby. "Look at this, Marcus," Vivica sneered, pointing a manicured finger directly at my face. "Look at what they sent us to deal with. I demanded a manager and they send out a glorified usher." Marcus stepped forward. He shoved his hands into the pockets of his expensive tuxedo and looked me up and down with profound, absolute disgust. The veins in his neck pulsed with arrogant indignation. He looked at me as if I was a piece of trash that had somehow blown onto his pristine driveway. "Is this your grand independent life, Simone?" Marcus asked, his voice booming with forced authority. "You cause a massive scene, you embarrass this family, and you walk out of my house with nothing. And for what? So you can stand at a door wearing a cheap suit and taking coats for people who actually matter. You are a security guard. You are a servant." I did not flinch. I did not blink. I kept my face entirely blank. I stood there holding my digital clipboard, letting their toxic arrogance wash over me. I needed them to feel completely untouchable. I needed them to climb to the very peak of their absolute delusion before I kicked the ladder out from under them. Kiara stepped up beside our father. The Swarovski crystals on the stolen midnight blue gown caught the light, shooting fragmented rainbows across the marble floor. She looked at me with a sickening mixture of pity and triumph. She adjusted the bodice of the dress, making sure I saw every single sparkling detail. "I told you she was a failure, Dad." Kiara chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "She probably begged the hotel for a shift tonight just so she could stand near actual wealth. It is pathetic. She is just a nobody holding a clipboard while we are here as personal guests of the Sterling Holdings CEO. I looked at the blue dress. I knew exactly how much it cost. I knew exactly who it belonged to. I knew the Atlanta police were currently matching the serial number on Kiara's stolen garment bag to the police report Antoine had filed an hour ago. Kiara was wearing a felony on her body, and she was using it to mock me. The irony was so delicious it almost made me smile. "Simone, you are going to do your job for once in your miserable life," Marcus barked, stepping right up to the velvet rope until he was inches from Jackson's massive chest. "You are going to tell this oversized bouncer to drop the rope. We have a private meeting with the CEO of Sterling Holdings, and we are already late. We belong in that ballroom. You belong out here on the floor. Do your job and move out of our way." I looked at the four of them. They formed a solid wall of entitlement. They were parasites, desperately trying to latch onto a new host. They thought I was the obstacle. They had absolutely no idea I was the executioner. I turned my head slightly and looked at Jackson. I gave him a single, nearly imperceptible nod. Jackson did not question the order. He reached down, unhooked the heavy brass clasp of the velvet rope, and took a large step backward, clearing the entrance to the Imperial Ballroom. Marcus let out a loud scoff of satisfaction. He adjusted his tuxedo jacket and marched past me without another glance. He walked into the ballroom like a conquering king, claiming his throne. Vivica followed right behind him, her head held high, completely ignoring my existence. She had erased me from her reality the moment I proved useful to her agenda. Kiara strutted past me next. She deliberately swerved closer to my side of the entrance, making sure the heavy silk of her stolen gown brushed aggressively against my simple black pantsuit. She leaned in as she passed, her eyes shining with malicious joy. "Enjoy the view from the lobby, Simone," Kiara whispered venomously. "Try not to spill anything on the real guests." She glided into the ballroom, leaving a trail of heavy, expensive perfume in her wake. Carter brought up the rear. He had hung back slightly, letting the Williams family clear the path. As he approached the entrance, he slowed his pace. He paused right next to me, blocking the doorway for a fraction of a second. He looked around, ensuring Marcus and Vivica were out of earshot. Then he leaned in uncomfortably close. I could smell the stale liquor mixing with his expensive cologne. His eyes darted down my body with a sickening, predatory hunger. He was completely intoxicated by his own perceived brilliance. He truly believed his manipulation had worked. He thought he had successfully weaponized my pain against my own family. "Good job, babe." Carter whispered, his voice low and thick with sleazy confidence. He offered me a quick, discreet wink. "You played your part perfectly. Keep the doors secure for me. I am going to go lock down our future. I will reward you later." He reached out and let his hand brush intimately against my hip before stepping away to follow his wife into the ballroom. He practically vibrated with arrogant energy as he walked away. He thought he had secured a billionaire investor. He thought he was walking into a room full of endless capital ready to save his miserable, failing law firm. I turned slowly, watching him disappear into the glittering crowd of the Imperial Ballroom. My hand dropped to my side. The cold, professional mask I had worn for the last 10 minutes completely vanished. It was replaced by a slow, chilling smile. I looked at his retreating back and spoke loud enough for only me and the heavy wooden doors to hear. "You will get your reward right now." I left the restaurant and returned to the small, rundown art gallery on the east side of the city. I maintained this miserable little storefront strictly as a cover identity. It was a dusty, cramped space filled with cheap canvas prints and harsh fluorescent lighting. It was perfectly designed to convince anyone who walked through the door that I was still exactly where my family had left me. I could buy the entire city block with a single phone call, but I sat on a broken, squeaky chair surrounded by peeling paint to maintain the illusion. I was sitting at the battered wooden reception desk, reviewing the catastrophic financial reports of my sister's collapsing medical clinic on my secure laptop. The satisfying crash of their empire was tracking perfectly on schedule. The bell above the front door chimed sharply, shattering the quiet atmosphere. I quickly minimized the financial spreadsheets just as the heavy glass door swung open. Carter stepped into the gallery. He looked frantic. His usually flawless hair was unkempt, and his expensive designer tie was loosened around his neck. He quickly grabbed the handle, locked the deadbolt, and flipped the open sign to closed. He turned around and stared at me. The look in his eyes made my skin instantly crawl. It was a toxic mixture of absolute desperation and a sickening, predatory hunger. He did not look like a man who was happily married to my sister. He looked like a cornered animal looking for a lifeline. I stood up slowly, keeping the heavy wooden desk between us. I forced my breathing to become shallow and widened my eyes, playing the role of the intimidated, estranged sister perfectly. "What are you doing here, Carter?" I asked, keeping my voice low and cautious. He did not answer immediately. He walked slowly around the small room, running his hand over a cheap landscape painting before turning his attention entirely back to me. He began to close the distance between us. "I am drowning, Simone," Carter said, his voice dropping into a low, rough whisper. "My law firm is falling apart before the doors even officially open. The creditors are freezing my commercial accounts and the bank is threatening to pull my secondary loans. I am facing total financial ruin. And your sister is absolutely useless." He spat the words out with pure venom. He took another step forward, rounding the edge of my desk. "All Kiara does is complain. She is a nagging burden. She is constantly whining about her own ruined clinic and constantly demanding things I cannot give her right now. I am so sick of playing the perfect husband to a complaining black woman who brings nothing but noise and headaches to my life. She completely falls apart the second things get hard. She is weak, Simone. She is incredibly weak." I backed up until my shoulder blades hit the cold drywall behind my desk. Carter closed the remaining distance, instantly trapping me against the wall. He was close enough that I could smell the stale scotch on his breath, masking his expensive cologne. He raised his arm and planted his hand flat against the wall right beside my head, caging me in. He leaned in, his eyes raking over my body with blatant, unapologetic disrespect. "I made a massive mistake 5 years ago," he murmured, staring at my lips. "I looked at the wrong sister. I thought Kiara was the prize, because your parents handed her everything on a silver platter. I thought she was the golden ticket. But she is just a spoiled child. You, on the other hand, you survived being thrown out into the streets. You built a life for yourself out of nothing. You have a fire in you that she could never replicate. I have always wanted you, Simone. Even when I was standing at the altar exchanging vows with her, I was thinking about what it would be like to break you in." My stomach violently churned at his disgusting confession. The sheer audacity of his words was breathtaking. He was an absolute parasite. A terrible, manipulative white man who had infiltrated a wealthy black family just to drain their resources and elevate his own status. And now that their money was drying up, he was standing here fetishizing me while actively betraying his wife. He thought I was a desperate, lonely girl waiting for a savior. He thought his attention was a prize I would eagerly accept. I forced myself to swallow the bile rising in my throat. I forced my hands to tremble slightly, portraying the exact image of a vulnerable woman who was secretly flattered by his forbidden attention. "What exactly are you saying, Carter?" I asked, letting my voice waver perfectly. "I am saying I am ready to drop Kiara right now," he declared, leaning closer until his lips were mere inches from my ear. "I will file the divorce papers tomorrow morning. I will leave her with nothing. But I need a massive favor from you first." He pulled back slightly, looking at me with a desperate, greedy intensity. "I know you are working as an event coordinator for the Sterling Arts Foundation gala tonight. I saw the staff list. I know the CEO of Sterling Holdings is going to be there in person. The same mysterious holding company that just destroyed my commercial loan. You have access, Simone." Carter continued, his voice taking on a frantic, commanding edge. "You have the staff credentials. Get me into that gala tonight. Put me in a room with the CEO. If I can just get 5 minutes face-to-face with the head of Sterling Holdings, I can pitch my firm. I can convince them to reinstate my funding and back my entire operation. You do this for me, and I will leave Kiara in the dirt. We can leave this miserable, toxic family behind and build a real empire together. Just you and me. I will take you out of this rundown gallery and give you the life you actually deserve." I stared at him, letting his toxic proposition hang in the quiet room. He truly believed his own lies. He truly believed he was such an irresistible, powerful prize that I would betray my own flesh and blood just to be chosen by him. He had absolutely no idea that he was standing squarely in the jaws of a trap I had built specifically for him. I lowered my eyes, biting my bottom lip, as if I was deeply conflicted by his offer. I let out a shaky breath, playing the role of the naive fool flawlessly. "You promise you will leave her," I whispered, looking up at him through my eyelashes. "You promise you will take me with you." Carter smiled, a triumphant, sickeningly arrogant smile. He thought he had won. He thought he had conquered me. "I swear it, Simone." He purred, running a finger lightly down my arm. "Just get me in front of the CEO." I stepped out from under his arm and moved back to my desk. I reached into the locked bottom drawer. I bypassed the stacks of corporate acquisition files and pulled out a thick black envelope embossed with the gold Sterling Arts Foundation crest. I slid a heavy metal access card out of the envelope. It was a premium VIP pass, meant only for the highest tier of corporate investors and board members. I held the card out to him, my hands trembling just enough to sell the final act of my performance. "The gala is tonight at the Four Seasons Hotel," I said softly. "This is an all-access pass. It will get you past the main security checkpoint and straight into the Imperial Ballroom. The CEO is scheduled to make a private address at exactly 9 o'clock. You can approach the stage then." Carter snatched the heavy metal card from my fingers, his eyes shining with greedy salvation. He looked at the pass like it was a winning lottery ticket. "I knew you were the smart sister," he sneered, pocketing the pass and straightening his designer tie. "Wear something nice tonight, Simone. I want you standing right beside me when I secure this massive deal we are going to celebrate." He did not wait for a response. He turned around, unlocked the front door, and walked out into the busy street, practically vibrating with renewed arrogance. He thought he had just secured his entire future. He thought he had just outsmarted everyone in the city. I stood perfectly still until his luxury sedan pulled away from the curb and completely disappeared into the heavy city traffic. The moment he was gone, the fragile, frightened expression melted entirely from my face. I stood up straight, rolling my shoulders back, and let out a long, slow breath. I reached my hand inside the lining of my tailored blazer and pulled out a tiny, high-definition digital voice recorder. The red light was blinking steadily. It had captured every single disgusting word, every empty promise, and every predatory threat he had just made against his wife. I pressed the save button. The device chimed softly, indicating the audio file was permanently locked and uploaded to my secure private cloud server. I walked over to the front window and looked out at the street, my reflection smiling back at me with cold, terrifying anticipation. "Your ticket to hell has been issued." I turned away from the heavy wooden doors and signaled to Jackson. He gave a sharp nod and immediately moved his security team to seal the entrance behind the Williams family. My role as the lowly event coordinator was officially over. I slipped through a discreet secondary door leading directly into a private VIP staging corridor. The air back here was cool and smelled faintly of expensive orchids. Two of my personal stylists were waiting anxiously in the shadows, holding a velvet garment bag. I did not say a single word to them. I simply unbuttoned the cheap black blazer I had worn to greet my family and let it slide off my shoulders. It hit the carpet with a soft, muted thud. I pulled the clear communication earpiece from my ear and dropped it onto a nearby silver tray. Underneath that awful, shapeless suit jacket, I was wearing an absolute masterpiece. It was a custom floor-length evening gown spun entirely from platinum thread and heavily encrusted with genuine, flawless diamonds. The dress was designed to command absolute submission. It was heavy with incalculable wealth and undeniably intimidating. The stylist rushed forward, making split-second adjustments to my hair and smoothing the sparkling train of the gown so it pooled perfectly around my heels. I took a deep breath, letting the terrifying reality of my power settle firmly into my bones. The trap was perfectly set. The mice were happily chewing on the poisoned cheese. It was time to spring the lock. Inside the Imperial Ballroom, the atmosphere was dizzying and electric. The space was a massive cavern of gold leaf vaulted ceilings, towering crystal chandeliers, and cascading floral arrangements. The wealthiest and most influential figures in Atlanta were packed shoulder to shoulder, holding champagne flutes and speaking in hushed, reverent tones. They were all waiting for one specific thing. They were waiting to see the face of the phantom billionaire who had been quietly, ruthlessly buying up their city. Carter pushed his way through the elegant crowd with the grace of a desperate, panicked animal. He grabbed Kiara by the wrist, dragging her behind him as he shoved past tech moguls and real estate tycoons. Marcus and Vivica followed closely behind, using their shoulders and elbows to clear a path. They did not care who they were offending. They completely ignored the disgusted, outraged glares from the actual elite billionaires they were shoving aside. Carter was laser-focused on the elevated main stage at the front of the room. He needed to be in the absolute front row. He needed to be the very first face the mysterious CEO saw when the curtains opened. "We need to be right at the center," Carter hissed over his shoulder, refusing to let go of Kiara. "When he steps out, I am going to shake his hand before the mayor even finishes the introduction." "Do not embarrass me, Kiara. Stand up straight and look like you belong in this tax bracket." Kiara sneered, batting his hand away, but she immediately struck a pose. She thrust her hips forward, trying to make the stolen blue silk gown look as dramatic and commanding as possible. She noticed a few wealthy women pointing and whispering in her direction. She smiled smugly, assuming they were admiring her high couture fashion. She had absolutely no cognitive capacity to realize they were recognizing the stolen centerpiece of Maison Laurent and silently judging her absolute tackiness. The sheer audacity of wearing a highly publicized stolen garment to a billionaire's gala was beyond their comprehension. Vivica leaned into Marcus, keeping her voice loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "Look at these people, Marcus," she whispered aggressively. "They are all terrified of this new CEO, but Carter already has the inside track. We are going to rule this city by tomorrow morning." Marcus nodded, his chest puffed out so far the buttons on his rented tuxedo looked ready to snap under the pressure. He glared at a local bank president standing nearby, projecting an aura of completely unearned superiority. The ambient hum of the ballroom suddenly cut out. The massive crystal chandeliers dimmed simultaneously until the room was plunged into an expectant, breathless darkness. The side chatter vanished instantly. The silence that fell over the thousands of guests was heavy and thrilling. A single brilliant white spotlight hit the center of the main stage. The mayor of Atlanta stepped up to the transparent crystal podium. He looked incredibly serious, projecting an air of profound respect and slight intimidation. He adjusted the microphone and looked out over the sea of industry leaders. "Good evening, Atlanta," the mayor began, his voice echoing powerfully through the state-of-the-art sound system. "Tonight is not just a gala. Tonight is a historical coronation. For the past year, a new force has entered our market. A visionary force that has reshaped our commercial landscape, stabilized our financial sector, and brought an unprecedented level of uncompromising capital to our great city. We have all felt the massive impact of Sterling Holdings. We have all wondered who possessed the sheer brilliance and immense unyielding power to execute such a flawless market takeover." Down in the front row, Carter was practically vibrating with manic energy. He smoothed his designer tie. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. He gripped the deactivated metal VIP pass in his pocket like a holy talisman. He was completely ready. He was absolutely certain that the man stepping onto that stage was going to be his savior. He was already rehearsing his opening pitch in his head. The mayor paused, letting the suspense stretch until the silence in the room was nearly unbearable. "Tonight, the shadows are finally lifting. The mayor continued, his voice rising with theatrical intensity. Tonight, we welcome the absolute future of Atlanta. Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the Royal Gallery. It is my profound honor to introduce the sole owner and chief executive officer of Sterling Holdings and his beautiful, brilliant wife. The spotlight on the main stage instantly snapped off. The ballroom was pitch black for a terrifying, thrilling second. Carter craned his neck, looking frantically around the dark room, ready to launch himself forward. Then a massive, blindingly bright tracking spotlight pierced the darkness. It did not hit the main stage. It swept high across the room and slammed directly into the elevated corner gallery, exactly where I was standing. The heavy velvet curtains had been pulled back. I stood at the top of the grand marble staircase, looking down at the sea of faces. The cheap black event coordinator jacket was gone. The spotlight hit the diamond-encrusted bodice of my gown, igniting a blinding explosion of refracted light. A collective shocked gasp echoed through the massive ballroom. I did not look at the mayor. I did not look at the crowd of billionaires. I looked straight down into the front row, locking eyes with the four people who had spent my entire life trying to destroy me. Vivica let out a strangled, choking sound. The delicate crystal wine glass slipped from her trembling fingers and shattered violently against the marble floor. Red wine splashed across her expensive shoes, but she did not even notice. Her eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated horror. Kiara's jaw physically dropped. Her mouth hung open in an ugly mask of confusion and terror. The stolen blue dress she was wearing suddenly looked ridiculous and cheap compared to the millions of dollars in diamonds wrapped around my body. She looked like a peasant who had accidentally wandered into a royal court. Carter turned the color of dead ash. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly and hollow. He took a stumbling step backward, bumping into Marcus. He shook his head back and forth rapidly, his brain completely rejecting the visual information it was receiving. Impossible. Carter muttered, his voice cracking with rising panic. That is impossible. She is just an employee. She is just a nobody. She cannot be here. From the deep pitch-black shadows just behind my shoulder, a figure emerged. It was a tall, impossibly broad-shouldered black man, radiating an aura of absolute terrifying authority. Desmond Sterling stepped into the blinding spotlight right beside me. He was wearing a bespoke midnight black tuxedo that commanded the air around him. He moved with the predatory grace of a man who owned everything he surveyed. The crowd erupted into frantic, excited whispers. Desmond did not look at them. He turned to me, his eyes softening with deep adoration. He reached out and took my hand in his. He raised my knuckles to his lips and pressed a slow, reverent kiss to my skin in front of thousands of the most powerful people in the world. Carter looked like he was going to vomit. Marcus gripped the edge of the stage to keep his knees from buckling. They were staring directly at the architect of their total destruction. Desmond slowly lowered my hand. His face hardened instantly as he turned his gaze down to the ballroom floor. He locked his cold, merciless eyes directly onto Carter and the Williams family. He reached out and smoothly took a wireless microphone from the bodyguard standing beside us. His deep, commanding voice rumbled through the ballroom speakers, shaking the floorboards beneath their feet. "And to open the gala tonight," Desmond said, a dark, dangerous smile touching the corners of his mouth. "My wife has a very special gift exclusively for one family here." Desmond handed the microphone to me. I stepped forward to the edge of the stage. The silence in the Imperial Ballroom was absolute. Thousands of eyes shifted from my husband to me. I looked directly down at my family. Their faces were frozen in various states of shock and horror. I raised my free hand and snapped my fingers. The massive digital screens behind us instantly flickered to life. Instead of the Sterling Arts Foundation logo, the screens displayed a series of heavily redacted financial documents. The bold black headers were unmistakable. They were debt acquisition contracts. "My gift to the Williams family is a lesson in accountability," I said, my voice echoing clearly across the vast room. For months, Carter Roth and Marcus Williams have been boasting about their expansive wealth and their incoming empire. They lied to their investors, they lied to their peers, and they lied to themselves. I gestured to the screens behind me. "Sterling Holdings has officially purchased every single outstanding loan tied to your names. I bought the massive debt for Marcus Williams Real Estate. I bought the startup capital loans for Carter's law firm. I even bought the heavily defaulted lease on Kiara's failing medical clinic. I own every single financial artery keeping your fake lives afloat." Marcus staggered back as if he had been physically struck. Vivica clutched her chest, gasping for air. Kiara stood paralyzed. "And as the sole owner of that debt, I am executing my right to call it in." I continued, pulling a sleek digital pen from the podium. Right now, in front of everyone. I tapped the pen against the smart screen on the podium. A sharp digital chime echoed through the speakers. I have just authorized the immediate liquidation and total freeze of every asset tied to the Williams and Roth names. I announced. Your bank accounts are zeroed out. Your credit lines are severed. Your properties are being seized as we speak. You have absolutely nothing left. Before Marcus could even open his mouth to protest, the heavy brass doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. 4 uniformed Atlanta police officers marched down the center aisle. They were moving with undeniable purpose, and they were heading straight for the front row. The crowd parted for them, immediately murmuring in shocked excitement. The lead officer stepped up to Kiara. He grabbed her arm, roughly spinning her around. "Kiara Roth, you are under arrest for grand larceny," the officer stated loudly, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "What are you doing?" Kiara shrieked, thrashing against his grip. "Let go of me! Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are, ma'am," the officer replied, clamping the cold steel around her wrists. "And we know exactly who owns the custom Maison Laurent gown you are currently wearing. You were caught on boutique security cameras stealing it 3 hours ago. You have the right to remain silent." The thousands of crystals on the stolen dress sparkled absurdly as the officers forced Kiara to march up the aisle. The entire room watched her humiliating exit. Vivica wailed, rushing after the police officers and begging them to stop. Marcus stood frozen, staring blankly at the floor. But Carter did not follow his wife. His survival instinct completely short-circuited his rational thought. He lunged toward the stage, gripping the edge of the platform with white knuckles. He looked up at me, his face twisted into a mask of pure pathetic desperation. "Simone, you cannot do this!" Carter screamed over the noise of the crowd, tears streaming down his face. "You said you would help me. You promised we would build an empire together. Please, Simone, I love you." Carter's desperate cries of love echoed through the cavernous ballroom, hanging in the air like a foul stench. He gripped the edge of the stage, his knuckles white, staring up at me with wide, pathetic eyes. He actually thought his manipulation was still working. He thought he could publicly pivot from his arrested wife to me and somehow salvage his miserable life. I did not flinch. I looked down at him with absolute disgust. I raised my hand and signaled the audio technician in the back booth. My own voice resonated through the massive speakers, crisp and clear. "You promise you will leave her. You promise you will take me with you." Then came Carter's voice, slimy and arrogant, amplified for every billionaire, politician, and socialite in Atlanta to hear. "I swear it, Simone. All Kiara does is complain. She is a nagging burden. I am so sick of playing the perfect husband to a complaining black woman who brings nothing but noise and headaches to my life. I will leave her in the dirt. We can leave this miserable, toxic family behind." The audio clip cut off, leaving a deafening, suffocating silence in its wake. Kiara let out a primal, blood-curdling scream. Despite the heavy steel handcuffs binding her wrists, she lunged forward. She threw her entire body weight at Carter, tackling him from the side. She kicked and thrashed her designer heels, connecting with his shins, as she screamed every vile curse word she knew. The charming, polished facade of the successful white lawyer instantly evaporated. Carter snarled, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unhinged rage. He grabbed Kiara by the shoulders and shoved her violently backward. She slammed hard onto the polished marble floor, the stolen crystals of her gown crunching under her weight. "Get off me, you crazy idiot!" Carter roared, completely losing his mind in front of the entire city elite. "Your whole family is pathetic. You are broke, useless frauds. I only married you for the money, and you do not even have that anymore. You dragged me down with you." The police officers immediately swarmed him, slamming him face first into the marble floor alongside his screaming wife. Below the stage, the reality of total, inescapable destruction finally shattered Vivica's mind. Her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the floor, her expensive gown soaking up the spilled red wine from her broken glass. She crawled forward on her hands and knees, weeping uncontrollably, until she reached the edge of the platform, directly beneath my feet. "Simone, please." Vivica wailed, her mascara running down her cheeks in thick, dark rivers. She reached her shaking hands up toward me. "I am your mother. I gave you life. I raised you. You cannot do this to your own blood. Please, Simone, remember everything I sacrificed for you." Desmond stepped slightly behind me, a silent, immovable pillar of strength, allowing me to take the final strike alone. I looked down at the weeping, broken woman, clawing at the stage. From my elevated position, she looked incredibly small, stripped of all her arrogance and fake power. "Your sacrifices," I asked, my voice deadly calm, cutting through her hysterical sobbing. Your parental debt was paid in full with the $5,000 you threw at me the night you kicked me out into the freezing snow. You bought my absence, Vivica. I looked at Marcus, who was frozen in silent shock, and then down at the struggling bodies of Carter and Kiara in police custody. And now I declared, my voice echoing with final absolute authority, you have absolutely zero value. The police officers hauled Kiara to her feet. She kicked and screamed, her expensive makeup smearing across her face in dark, jagged lines. But her resistance was completely useless. The heavy brass doors of the ballroom slammed shut behind her, abruptly cutting off her frantic wails. Carter was dragged out right behind her, his head hanging low in absolute defeat. Within 24 hours, his entire life violently imploded. The audio recording of his predatory confession and arrogant boasting was leaked to the press, resulting in immediate disbarment and a barrage of federal financial fraud lawsuits. He went from a high society lawyer to a disgraced criminal facing years behind bars. Marcus and Vivica fared no better. With their accounts permanently frozen and their assets legally seized by Sterling Holdings, the bank foreclosed on their sprawling suburban mansion by the end of the week. The high society friends they had spent decades trying to impress instantly abandoned them, pretending they had never even heard the Williams name. My parents were forced to pack whatever meager belongings they could carry in garbage bags and relocate to a cramped, decaying apartment complex in the absolute worst neighborhood in the city. Vivica traded her designer gowns for a life of relentless, bitter poverty, while Marcus sat in silence staring at peeling wallpaper and mourning the empire he threw away just to protect his own fragile ego. They were completely eradicated from the Atlanta elite. The chaotic noise of the ballroom faded away as the memory dissolved. I stood perfectly still, letting the profound, peaceful silence of our penthouse suite wash over me. The camera slowly pulls back, taking in the vast, elegant expanse of the room. I rested my head against Desmond's strong shoulder, feeling the steady, reassuring rhythm of his heartbeat. His arm wrapped securely around my waist, anchoring me. We stood together in the shadows, looking through the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Below us, the city of Atlanta sprawled out in a breathtaking, endless carpet of glittering lights. It was a beautiful, vibrant empire, and it belonged entirely to us. People often say family is where you belong. I said, my voice soft but echoing with absolute, terrifying clarity in the quiet room. But sometimes you have to burn that toxic family to the ground to build a new kingdom from the ashes. Good night, Atlanta. The camera continues to drift backward, slipping smoothly through the glass and out into the cool night air. The glittering skyline reflects off the windows for one final brilliant second before the screen fades entirely to pitch black.